At Disney World in Central Florida, cops arrested 27-year-old Andrew Hall of Mentor, Ohio, after a Walt Disney World Marine unit rescued him from one of their many resort-owned lakes. Apparently, a little too happy thanks to liquid libation, he crashed through the plastic windshield of a golf cart, wrestled control of cart, crashed into a pier at Bay Lake, jumped into the water, tried to escape, got into distress, and when rescued, bellowing racial slurs and refusing to get into the boat. Mr. Hall resting comfortably in the jail. His lawyer is seeking release on grounds of having fallen asleep during a ride and suffering paranoid delusions after being forced to hear "It's a Small World" 37 consecutive times. Release, therapy, maybe more adult beverages. Stand by. This is The Hard Line.
We have gotten nothing in return, but the Cubans have gotten plenty in return. And if that's our way of negotiating, then we have a real problem on our hands. And the message we send in the Western Hemisphere, in Venezuela, where we have, I don't see our partners engaging with us because we've changed our Cuba policy. This opens the door towards promotion of democracy. We're not seeing very much democracy in Venezuela.
Israel wants peace. I want peace. We want a peace that would end the conflict once and for all. My position has not changed. I don't support a one-state solution. I don't believe that's a solution at all. I support the vision of two states for two peoples, a demilitarized Palestinian state that recognizes the Jewish state.
ISIS threatened us and dismissed us from our homes. They wanted to kill us, so we fled.
We fled our homes after being seized by Islamic State militants. We couldn't cross the bridge because the security forces put a condition of sponsor to let us enter the capital.
From a career that began in 1980 as an analyst specializing in something as mundane as international energy issues, Michael Morrell rose to become one of the top spies in America, serving under Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama, and Deputy Director and Acting Director of the Central Intelligence Agency. And his new book, The Great War of Our Time, The CIA's Fight Against Terrorism, from al-Qaida to ISIS, is both creating and answering questions about the difficult time following the 9/11 attacks, and reopening some wounds that would seem to indicate the war in Iraq was about much more than national security. Let's welcome Michael Morrell into the show. Michael, thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be with you.
Michael, what was your specific aim of the book? What was your motivation?
So really, three things I was trying to accomplish, Ed. One is I'm deeply concerned about this particular type of extremism that we are fighting today. I'm concerned that the threat remains significant to our country. I think this is going to be a long war, and I really wanted to tell Americans that. The second is I think the CIA is a kind of misunderstood place. There's a lot of different views out there. One view is kind of a James Bond view of the world, that there isn't a secret we can't find, there isn't a plot we can't stop. That's a myth. You know, there's another view out there that everything we touch falls apart, there isn't anything we can do right. That's a Maxwell Smart view of the world. That myth is wrong. And then the third is that we're a rogue organization, that we operate without the guidance of the White House, without the oversight of the Congress. That's wrong, right? The reality, this is incredibly dedicated, hardworking people trying to protect the country who get most things right, but like any organization, get a couple things wrong. That's what I was trying to accomplish in this book.
You have, of course, come under a lot of fire with this book from some people and other people trying to learn a little bit more, and I mentioned after 9/11. There certainly has already been a couple of interviews that have indicated that you are pointing out, and again, not putting words in your mouth, but they're saying that you're indicating that George Bush and Dick Cheney falsely presented WMD intelligence to the public to basically start the Iraq War. Were you properly quoted on that?
No, I wasn't. You know, in fact, the theme of the book with regard to Iraq weapons of mass destruction is just the opposite. The theme of the book is that there is this view out there that the Bush administration, hardliners in the Bush administration, pushed us to believe that Saddam had chemical weapons, that he had a biological weapons production capability, and that he was reconstituting his nuclear weapons program. We didn't have to be pushed there, Ed, because we already believed it. And the best way to prove that to you is to tell you that we told President Clinton the same thing before George Bush ever came to office.
Then let's be clear. You're saying then that people are saying that George Bush, they pushed us into war. You're saying that as far as you're aware, your time at the CIA, he did not just simply push us into the war in Iraq simply to go to war, simply to revenge his father, but for whatever reason, that was not his intent.
So you have to ask him what his intent is, right? My perception in walking into the Oval Office every day, my perception was, here was the context, right? 9/11 had just happened. 3,000 people had just been killed. It's his job to protect the American people, and he feels that stronger than anybody else. The CIA and the intelligence community and every intelligence service in the world is telling him that Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. And we're telling him that Saddam has relationships with some international terrorist group, not al-Qaida, different story, but with some international terrorist group. So he's sitting there thinking, as bad as 9/11 was, right? How bad could it have been if Saddam would use those weapons of mass destruction against us, or if Saddam would give those to the terrorist groups that he has supported over the years and they use them against us? That's what I think drove him to war.
So we're getting back to that question that's been asked.
And by the way, the vast majority of members of Congress agreed with him for exactly the same reasons that I just told you.
Which then comes back to this question that is going around an awful lot these days. If you knew what you know now, and this is what people are asking the presidential candidates, would you advise the president to go into Iraq and topple Saddam Hussein? If you knew what you know now, I'm going to guess that probably people like yourself would say, wait a minute, Mr. President, we're not sure, let's stop.
No, what I'm going to tell you, Ed, is that's an unfair question, because you can never have 20/20 hindsight when you're making the decision. I think the fair question is, if you knew then what you knew then, what would you have done if you were the president? That's the fair question to these presidential candidates, not if we know now what we know now, would you have done it then?
But I think perhaps
That's
what people are pointing
question.
out, they're saying that if you knew that a lot of this intelligence simply wasn't true, would you then still go into the war? I believe that's what they're trying to get to.
Well, if that's what you're trying to get to, then obviously you wouldn't do it, right? Because the intelligence turned out to be wrong, right? But my point is, it wasn't the Bush administration who was telling the intelligence community to say that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. That's what we really thought.
All right, so let's look at some of the presidential candidates now. Is Hillary Clinton, in your mind, would she be somebody that would be ready for that 3 a.m. call as commander-in-chief?
So I'm not going to go there, right? My job as an intelligence officer is to look at what's happening overseas and to tell a president of the United States, whoever that happens to be, Hillary Clinton or Jeb Bush, here's what's happening, here's how you should think about it as you try to make the best decisions for the country. I am not going to start speculating about presidential candidates, because I look overseas, I don't look here at home.
Then let's get to this point then, and not asking you to pick anybody then, that's fair. I got about a minute and a half left. How has politics, Michael, gotten in the way of fighting terrorism and keeping us from winning battles against killers?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple things. One is the CIA has always, this is not new, has always found itself as the meat in the sandwich. And what I mean by that is the CIA finds itself in the middle of policy debates and political debates. What does being the meat in the sandwich means? It means people take bits of what we say and use it to their advantage, right? We've always found ourselves there, but it has gotten worse, right? Benghazi is a great example of that. And I don't think it's healthy for the country. I don't think it's healthy for my agency. And you know, it's not a comfortable place to be. I used to have to tell my analysts, don't pay any attention to it. Don't pay any attention to it. Go back to work. Call it like you see it. That's your job.
I got about 30 seconds left then. You mentioned Benghazi. Are you comfortable? Do you feel that we know everything that we need to know to make the decision in what actually happened?
So I'm pretty confident that we know what happened that night at the facility. I'm pretty confident that there was not a lot of pre-planning. I'm pretty confident that there were extremists there, some associated with al-Qaida. I am 100% confident that this was a terrorist attack. I am 100% confident that four great Americans were murdered that night. What we still don't know is the motivation for those who did it, and we're not going to find out until we capture them and bring them to justice. Which hopefully is something the CIA and our military will do in fast order. I want to remind everybody once again, the book is called The Great War of Our Time, the CIA's Fight Against Terrorism from al-Qaida to ISIS. And Michael Morrell was there. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck with the book. I hope we talk again. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Take care. Stay with us. The Hard Line continues.